Hey, this is Josh Zeller with Cultural Catholic coming at you with another Domestic Friday. And today is a lot of interesting stories. Today we'll start out with breaking news of Priebus leaving the White House, move on to DeVos and her and the damage she could do as Secretary of Education, and finally Trump's ban on transgender service members. So we'll start out with Priebus. All right. So Yahoo News reports today that in a bombshell announcement capping a week of brutal administration infighting, President Trump said Friday that he has replaced embattled White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus with Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly. Trump, who announced the move on Twitter, did not say whether he had fired Priebus or whether he had resigned, but the former Republican National Committee chairman told Yahoo News via text that he had tendered his resignation to the president on Thursday. I am pleased to inform you that I have just named General/Secretary John F. Kelly as White House Chief of Staff. He is a great American, the president tweeted, and a great leader. John has also done a spectacular job at Homeland Security. He has been a true star of my administration. When asked if he was aware of the staff shakeup prior to Trump's Twitter announcement, Priebus texted, "Yeah, we talked. I resigned privately yesterday." So a little bit of background on this. There's been some issues with Reince Priebus and the new secretary and the new communications director, Scaramucci. Apparently, Scaramucci had been blocked from entering the administration for about 6 months by Priebus, and Scaramucci's been doing all sorts of crazy things on CNN interviews and through Twitter, bashing Priebus, and so this seems to be the culmination of all of that. So not only are we getting a new chief of staff, we'll need a new Homeland Security Secretary. So that could end up pretty bad for us. The Yahoo News article goes on to explain, speaking to reporters as he arrived back in Washington from Long Island, New York, where earlier Friday he delivered a speech on gang violence. Trump praised Kelly, calling him a great American, and added that Priebus is a good man. The news came at the end of a tumultuous week of White House infighting, notably pitting incoming communications director Anthony Scaramucci against Priebus. It came on a day that began just after midnight as Senate Republicans failed overnight to pass legislation aimed at repealing and replacing Obamacare, a central Trump legislative priority championed by Priebus. Now that may have something to do with it, although I feel that since Scaramucci is a friend of Trump, that was probably much more of what happened. Although it may, again, the healthcare repeal issues may have been a factor in it. I don't think that was the deciding factor. Now to go on to something that I feel very angry about, education and Secretary Betsy DeVos. All right, so The Guardian, in a very interesting story on Wednesday, reports that the Education Secretary, who has 4 children and 5 grandchildren, did everything expected of her. This is in regards to the story starts out depicting DeVos and Ivanka Trump spending time with some young children at the Smithsonian, trying to get them to continue to read over the summer. Did everything expected of her, but could not help looking a little stilted and joyless next to Ivanka, who, even as her husband Jared Kushner was testifying to the House Intelligence Committee about Russia, was easy and ebullient. DeVos looked on at the president's daughter was mobbed, dished out enthusiastic hugs, and proclaimed, "I need a high five." But while the Trumps steal the limelight and consume attention on issues from Russia to healthcare, it is DeVos, America's 11th education secretary, who is viewed by many in the sector as the most dangerous and destructive since the post was created by Jimmy Carter in 1979. DeVos, a devout Christian, stands accused of quietly privatizing schools, rescinding discrimination guidelines, and neutering her own department's civil rights office. Along with the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, she is said to be the tip of the spear of Trump's illiberal agenda. Moving on from that to something to get a little bit more into it. What DeVos, a 59-year-old entrepreneur, philanthropist, and former chair of the Michigan Republican Party, lacks in expertise or charisma, she makes up for in money, something that always guaranteed to impress the property tycoon Trump. Her billionaire family has been active in the Republican Party for decades, especially as donors bankrolling candidates. Her husband, Dick, is the heir to the Amway direct sales fortune, while her brother, Eric Prince, is the founder of Blackwater, a private security contractor notorious for its operations in Iraq, better known as the modern-day Crusaders who wanted to kill Muslims. DeVos, who once called traditional public school districts a dead end, is accused of defunding and destabilizing public education in Michigan by bankrolling school choice initiatives. Now, to the chagrin of teachers' unions, she is trying to apply the same ideas to the nation, championing privately run, publicly funded charter schools and voucher programs that enable families to take tax dollars from the public education system to the private sector. The first mention of DeVos's name at the American Federation of Teachers Conference at a hotel in Washington last week prompted spontaneous boos and hisses from the delegates holding public school proud signs. Randy Weingarten, president of the union that represents 1.6 million American teachers and other workers, delivered a fiery speech in which she branded the secretary a public school denier. Kind of a climate change denier spinoff. She said, take the word choice. You hear it all the time these days, school choice. Betsy DeVos uses it practically in every sentence. You could show her, as I did, an award-winning robotics program, and she'd say, what about choice? Which she actually said. You could probably say, good morning, Betsy, and she'd say, that's my choice. She must love buffet restaurant buffets. So a little bit of background in this. Betsy DeVos is one of the most contentious picks for the Democratic Party to vote on. No Democrat voted for her. They actually had to use the vice president's vote in the Senate to break the tie, which is unprecedented for secretary positions. And like was said in there, a lot of it was on choice, and basically school choice is, like it was described in there, using taxpayer money to help kids go to private schools or charter schools. My thought on education is it is not supposed to be a for-profit thing. Some charter schools are good. I will admit that's a lot are not. It really is dependent on the oversight. And I also am a little iffy about private schools, again, because oversight and what they can and can't, what they can teach and what they sometimes do teach. Additionally, she also has some discrimination issues. She didn't answer a lot of questions on discrimination, especially in regards to funding schools that could discriminate on what students they let in, which is something that is brought up in the article that I will get to in a bit, as well as not being willing to enforce the Americans with Disabilities Act as it pertains to education, which is a disturbing thing should it happen. I think everyone deserves a quality education, and I think a way to do that is to change the way we fund education, because currently it's done with property taxes. And I went to schools in both the Twin Cities of Minnesota and rural Minnesota, and I could really see the difference. In the Twin Cities area, everything was fine. We really I mean, I was young, but I don't remember there being too much of an issue. I mean, there was one issue, but there wasn't too much of an issue in securing funding for the schools. But in rural Minnesota, the school district I was in, they had to do a referendum vote 3 separate times before it actually went through. And if it didn't go through, a lot of programs would have been cut. And that's something that DeVos is also up for, cutting after school and summer programs that are very useful. Um, and so I think this is like everything is being sucked up by the Russia investigation, by the healthcare debate. Those are important things to be talked about, but not to the exclusion of everything else. Um, Going on with the article, choice is a loaded word in the U.S. education circles. Opponents point to the Jim Crow era when, following the Supreme Court's 1954 Brown versus Board of Education ruling that outlawed racial segregation in schools, white communities used public funds in the form of vouchers to relocate their children to private schools. Black students were left behind in public schools that lacked proper resources. Prince Edward County in Virginia even closed all of its public schools for 5 years. Trump's proposed budget would cut the education department by $9 billion while funding $1.4 billion in school choice initiative while funding a $1.4 billion school choice initiative. Among those to be axed is an Obama-era $12 million grant scheme intended to help local districts devise ways to boost socioeconomic diversity within their schools. Now that scheme, the idea is the more diverse a school is, the better it will be for everyone involved. There have been studies pointing to how schools with higher, lower socioeconomic individuals being serviced by the school equals less funding for the school and worse outcomes for the students. And this was an attempt to try to balance that as best as possible. And with this being cut, with that being cut, that would be a huge blow to education outcomes. And for the last year, I actually worked for a nonprofit trying to help improve education outcomes to an extent, as it was focused on working towards improving college access and success for low-income students. And something like this would definitely harm the students that we work with. There are also some issues with the budget, like cutting Pell Grants, which are a lifesaver for the students we work with. Um, Additionally, critics point to DeVos's record in Michigan, where she used her wealth to push legislators to defund public education in favor of for-profit charter schools. Students' test results have plummeted as a consequence, they argue. Soroka, who is a spokesman for a group called Democracy for America, who is based in Detroit, said, "What's so amazing is that Betsy DeVos and the DeVos family have almost single-handedly destroyed public schools in the state of Michigan. They've gone from some of the best in the country to among the worst in the region. It's mind-boggling that anyone would put her in charge of education policy." He added, "There's almost no one else in Trump's cabinet that has raised so much animosity from not just progressives, but across the American public. She and Jeff Sessions are the two tenors of Trump's cabinet. They are on the tips of everyone's tongues." So basically what they're saying is that they're beasts of some sort. I'm not good with French. But a common theme with Republicans is if there's something they don't like, they put someone in charge that is fundamentally opposed to that thing. They did that with the EPA. Obviously, with Betsy DeVos, they're doing that with the education department. Like I said, the policy that would best help students is to change how funding is done. In addition, I think there needs to be like a base standard across, like everyone needs to know this basic math, basic English, basic social studies. basic science, and then based upon local communities and what they need, you can add on to that. But like that, those four things need to be baseline across the country, I think, because there's a wide difference of educational outcomes, and that's partially because of funding. That's also partially because of how standards are set, and there's like at a minimum 50 different standards, if not thousands of different standards based on the different school districts that exist. Um, and that's the public school districts. Don't even get me started on private and charter, which don't have the same oversight. However, if the Republicans get their way, they will get no public oversight but public dollars, and that to me is a problem. Now, finally, the big bombshell that happened on Wednesday. Reuters reports that U.S. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday he would not allow transgender individuals to serve in the U.S. military in any capacity. After consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military, Trump wrote in a series of Twitter posts. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail, the Republican president wrote. This was basically out of left field. No one at all saw this coming. And this is, it's possibly in response to Obama, because a lot of things that Trump is doing is, if Obama's name is on it, he's basically cutting it. In addition, the Reuters article pointed out that the Pentagon ended its ban on openly transgender people serving in the U.S. military last year under Democratic President Barack Obama's administration. It was expected to start allowing transgender people to begin enlisting this year, provided they have been stable in their preferred gender for 18 months. Seems reasonable. Last month, Secretary Jim Mattis approved a 6-month delay in allowing transgender recruits to join the U.S. Armed Forces. The delay alarmed transgender advocates. That is understandable, but I think the idea behind that was to get a little bit more studying, because there's not a lot of information known. Although I think the Rand Corporation did a fairly good job of estimating what is currently in it. Now that could change with the addition of allowing them to openly serve and openly enlist. But I don't think it would change it that drastically. But I think if they need to study, they need to study. Personally, I think they should have started earlier. Like when Mattis became Secretary of Defense. And to that point, last year, then Defense Secretary Ash Carter cited a study by the Rand Corporation think tank saying there were about 2,500 transgender active duty service members and 1,500 reserve transgender service members. Additionally, the military published a study earlier this year in Journal of the American Medical Association Internal Medicine, showing that most of its family physicians reported in 2016 that they had not been formally trained to care for transgender individuals. At least one military medical center had implemented training for its doctors, however. So this is something that that they're trying to improve, that they need to improve. If they are going to allow, which this may not be the case anymore, depending on how things go from here. But they need to improve those facilities before going any further. I personally think that they should, if someone fits the bill, let them in. If they are physically, mentally capable, no reason why they shouldn't be allowed in. Now, what's interesting is, as the Guardian reported on Thursday, so yesterday, U.S. defense chiefs have pushed back against Donald Trump's attempt to ban transgender people from serving in the military, saying the policy would not be overturned until they received formal direction to do so. In a rebuke to Trump's attempt to run the government to run the government and military via Twitter. General Joseph Dunford, America's top military officer, said on Thursday that the armed forces would continue to permit transgender people serve openly until the Defense Secretary Jim Mattis had received Trump's direction to change the policy and figured out how to implement it. Basically, the president doesn't have the authority to change things via Twitter or run the government via Twitter. And there's a little pushback from the people in charge of the military. Going further, in a memo to all military service chiefs, commanders, and enlisted military leaders, Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said there will be no modifications to the current policy for now, amid questions about Trump's announcement on Twitter that the U.S. government will not accept or allow transgender people to serve in any capacity in the military. I know there are questions about yesterday's announcement, Dunford began, adding that nothing would change until the president's direction had been received by Mattis and Mattis had issued implementation guidance. In the meantime, we will continue to treat all of our personnel with respect, Dunford wrote. As importantly, given the current fight and the challenge we face, we will all remain focused on accomplishing our assigned missions. Going further, the Dunford statement suggests that Mattis was given no presidential direction on changing the transgender policy. Mattis has been on vacation this week and has been publicly silent amid questions about Trump's announced ban. His spokesman declined to comment on Thursday. On Wednesday, they said the Pentagon would work with the White House to provide revised guidance to the military in the near future. Dunford himself was not aware of that Trump was going to announce the ban, a U.S. official said. The official was not authorized to discuss the matter and so spoke on the condition of anonymity. Trump's announcement caught the Pentagon flat-footed and unable to explain what it called Trump's guidance. Basically, what they're saying is no one had any idea this was coming. The press secretary, Huckabee Sanders, she said that he actually talked to military leaders. However, these statements from the Pentagon deny that, and I'm going to believe the Pentagon over Trump because he is not known to be a very honest actor. And there was actually a lot of backlash from, there was a lot of criticism and a little bit of support. And also a little bit more information. The Pentagon has not released data on the number of transgender people currently serving. A Rand Corporation study has estimated the number at between 1,320 and 6,630 out of 1.3 million active duty troops. Criticism for Trump's actions was immediate and strong from both political parties. John McCain, the Arizona Republican and Vietnam War hero, said Trump was simply wrong. Any American who meets current medical and readiness standards should be allowed to continue serving. He said, there is no reason to force service members who are able to fight, train, and deploy to leave the military, regardless of their gender identity. Not everyone at the Capitol agreed. Duncan Hunter, a member of the House Armed Services Committee, said it's about time that a decision is made to restore the warrior culture and allow the U.S. military to get back to business. Transgender people already in uniform were concerned about what comes next. Everybody is hurt. Everybody is scared, said Rudy Akbarian, 26, who was in the military but did not identify his branch. Like I said, I think anyone who, like McCain said, surprisingly enough, anyone who can serve, who's passed the tests, who's gone through training, who's done everything, anyone who can serve should. And I personally think anyone who can fight should be allowed to fight. I mean, that's what women are being allowed to do now. And this was the next step in greater equality within the military and who can serve. That's been going on since 1948 when there was integration. Actually, technically starting during the Civil War when black people were allowed to fight and join the military. This is weird. I don't know what's going on entirely. There are theories going around that it's to placate his base because he's been going after Jeff Sessions, and his base loves him because he's uber conservative and crap like that. Who knows? All I know is we've got a crazy person in charge, and that's not good. This is Joshua Zeller with Cultural Catholics signing off.